Chapter 23 of It Happened in Egypt. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. It Happened in Egypt by Charles Norris Williamson and Alice Muriel Williamson. Chapter 23. Bengal Fire. The Temple of Mut, I think, must always be mysterious, even by day. That night it was more than mysterious. It was sinister. Darkness shut us in among the pillars and the black, lion-faced statues. The least imaginative of my charges seemed to feel the influence of the place. Not an Arab, not even the superior boat dragoman, would come inside with us, because, after the sun has set, dethroned Sekhet comes into her own again. Strange stories are whispered by Arabs of the Temple of Mut, and of the ghostly golden dahabeah that once a year sails slowly by to a faint sound of music on the sacred lake. We had brought candles with us, protected by smoky glass from the wind that swept down the avenue of broken sphinxes outside, and hissed like angry cats through the dark courts lined with granite statues of the cat goddess. Yet despite the mystery, or because of it, people seemed curiously happy. The spirit of the past, of old Egypt, touched them in the shadowy places of this ruined temple, brushed them with its wings, and whispered half-heard words into their ears. They talked to each other in low tones, as if not to miss the whispers or the soft footfalls of unseen things, and they did not laugh and make jokes or ask silly questions according to their irritating custom. I blessed this mood, for my nerves were jangled, more than ever after the Bronsons unobtrusively appeared, waiting for Bridget and Monty to come, wondering if they would come, or what we should do if they didn't, because suddenly in this place of gloom and eloquent silence all the clever little plans Anthony and I had made in case of accident seemed futile. How could we have let those two walk alone into a trap? I blamed myself, I blamed Anthony, and sometimes I gave the wrong answers to Mrs. East, who walked with me, trying to keep out of the way of the crowd. She was anxious to talk of her niece, and to relate how she had been singing my praises to Monty. "You mustn't be discouraged," she said. "Never mind about the hieroglyphic letter. Oh no, you needn't worry. I haven't told her it was yours. Better let her think what she thought at first. Did I tell you what she thought? Please answer me, Lord Ernest. I don't mind your knowing, now, that I believed it was from Antoun to me. Believing so did no harm. Why should it, to me or to him? I soon guessed that there was a mistake somewhere, when he didn't follow the letter up. I was not offended by the proposal as Monty would have been. Oh, not if she'd known it was yours, but if she'd supposed Antoun was making love to her. Don't you see, you must have seen, you're so quick and observant, that she's been caught by the romance of him, just as she was afraid she might be by some thrilling prince when she came to Egypt. She's miserable, she's hating herself, and you won't save her, though I've prepared her mind." "So that's what you meant when you hinted that I could spare her humiliation," I said, half in laughter, half in bitterness, suddenly able to concentrate my mind upon the talk. "Do you think a man would want a girl to take him for such a reason, when she's caring for someone else?" "But if it would be impossible for her to marry this someone else?" "Why should it be impossible?" "She would think it impossible." "Would she if—" I checked myself, but Mrs. East understood instantly. "If he has a secret," she said, "then none of us has a right to suggest it to her. Every man for himself, Lord Ernest, in love. Antoun Effendi has no reason to feel too kindly to Monty. You'll be robbing your friend of nothing if you speak to her. If he's in love with anyone, it isn't my niece." "At least it's not you. Perhaps it's Biddy, after all," my thoughts interpolated. "To care for Monty would be beneath his dignity, considering all that's past. And you can make her happy, as well as yourself, by taking my advice," Mrs. East went on. "Aren't you going to be sensible?" Just then came a murmur expressing surprise, or some other new emotion, from one of the outer courts where the crowd had wandered, Cleopatra having lured me, yes, lured is the word, into the sanctuary itself. "Something has happened," I said. "Let's go back and see what it is." "Perhaps Antoun has come," Mrs. East caught me up eagerly. "He was coming, wasn't he, when he'd finished his business? Or maybe it's only Monty and Bridget." "Only Monty and Bridget!" In the hope of seeing Antoun, Cleopatra turned her back upon the dreary sanctuary not unwillingly, even though the burning question was left unanswered. I hurried her through the dark passages which lay between us and the courts, lighting our way with a glassed-in candle, and it was all I could do not to cry aloud, "Thank Heaven!" or "Hurrah!" or something else that would have opened people's eyes, when I saw that indeed Bridget and Monny had arrived. It was Rachel Guest and Willis Bailey who had hailed them from afar, as candle lights flashed across their faces, and suddenly, to my eyes, the gloomy temple seemed to be brilliantly illuminated. I don't know how exactly I contrived to leave Cleopatra and get to the newcomers, but I did get to them in less than a minute. Perhaps I was a little rude to Mrs. East. I wasn't thinking of that at the time, however, nor of her. I separated the two I wanted from the others. Their faces radiated excitement, but I was not sure if it meant success. I was sure only that they had been through an ordeal and were feeling the reaction. "You're safe," I said, and shook hands with them feverishly. Then I shook hands all over again. "Safe, yes," Monny answered. "And Mabel, why don't you ask about her? Oh, Lord Ernest, we've done it, thanks to Antoun Effendi. We should have failed at the last if it hadn't been for him. Just look over there at the Bronsons, and see if you can guess who it is they're talking to." I looked and saw tall, thin Mr. Bronson and short, plump Mrs. Bronson trying to form a hollow square around a little figure in a long grey coat of Biddy's, and a hood with a veil I remembered her wearing the day we motored to Heliopolis. It seemed about 100 years ago. I had conducted so much and so violently since, but I was not too old to remember Biddy's hood. What if Neil Sheridan, poking about alone with a candle, could see through that veil? "Triumph!" I exclaimed. "You're heroines!" I didn't know then how true were my own words. Was it a great adventure? "Was it, Biddy?" the girl asked, half shyly of her friend. "So great that I can't talk about it," Bridget answered, and her eyes implored mine not to ask questions. Also, they said that she had things to tell me, not now, but by and by. Things for me alone. Biddy's eyes could be wonderful. "Where's Antoun Effendi?" Monny broke in, when I had taken Bridget's hint, and was beginning to say that we must go and speak to the Bronsons. "He hasn't come yet," I answered, and then her eyes, too, began to implore. "Not come yet? But it's a long time. We found Mr. and Mrs. Bronson outside, hoping for us to arrive, and we talked to them and introduced Mabel and explained things. They would have liked to go and take her quickly away, but Biddy and I begged them not to. We said it would be better to wait for the rest, and all the crowd to be together in case of trouble. Oh, we discussed everything, for ages, minutes and minutes. I do think Antoun Effendi ought to be here, unless—" I caught her up quickly. "Unless?" "Well, you see, we left him inside Rashid's gate, where he'd just knocked down a big negro, and was keeping back Rashid and lots of other men, anyhow 3, with a pistol, not the one he lent me. He told us to go, so we went." "He told them to go, so they went?" A change, this, for the Gilded Rose. She spoke at the moment like an obedient little girl. "If he told you to go, it was all right, you may be sure," I said encouragingly. But despite my faith in Anthony as a fighting man, I felt, well, somewhat dismayed at the picture called up. Rashid, and anyhow 3 men. It was rather a large order. If with a wish I could have sent every member of the set back to their peaceful homes in England and America, and thus rid myself of them in a second, they would have all found themselves walking in at their respective front doors. I wished this wish, but having a mere smoking candle in my hand, and not Aladdin's lamp, it didn't work. There they inconveniently remained in the Temple of Mut, looking twice as large as life. "What if I tell them they've seen everything?" I muttered. "They haven't, but that's a detail. If I could rush 'em all back to the boat, and you with them, of course, and get Mabella Hânem and the Bronsons off safely, I could go look for Antoun. Of course we were to wait for him, but I don't like the picture you've painted." "Oh, do look for him," broke in Monny. "Leave us to care for ourselves. I'm sure we can. There are enough of us. And Mr. Bronson is a consul. Go and get the police." "I can't leave you," I said. "Antoun would be the last one to forgive me if I did that. But I'll start off the party now. The arabeahs and donkeys are waiting. Listen to the stentorian voice of the conductor, announcing—" I tried to speak gaily, but the announcement, which I opened my mouth to roar through the temple, was never made. There came instead at that instant a rival roar from outside. Mine would have been the roar of a sucking dove. This other was a wild bull roar of rage. What it was for, who was making it, and whether it concerned us, we did not know, but it was the sound of many voices, and flowed to us on the wind. Driving nearer out of distance, it was startling and caused the heart to miss a beat. Suddenly the thought sprang into my mind that this was like something in a theatre. We were on the stage, in a play of ancient Egypt, and a mob of supers was yelling for our lives in the wings. They would pour out upon the stage and attack us. Only the hero and heroine would be saved. All the villains and other unnecessary people would be polished off. Everybody had stopped talking. Involuntarily, groups drew together. We looked over our smoking candles, past the standing statues and the fallen statues, away toward the columns of the temple entrance. Mr. and Mrs. Bronson, and the girl in Biddy's veiled hood and cloak, walked across the court and joined our party of 3. Neil Sheridan was at a distance. His prophetic soul told him nothing. "I hope that fellow Rashid Bey hasn't worked up any trouble against us," the American consul from Asiut said in a low, somewhat worried tone. Instantly I was certain that what he hoped had not happened, was indeed the thing that had happened. I seemed to see Rashid stirring up a crowd of his fellow Mussulmans, telling them that dogs of Christians had robbed him of his foreign wife, who was on the point of accepting Islam. Nothing easier than for Rashid to find us. All Luxor knew we were in the Temple of Mut. These men of Luxor and the other Nile towns of Upper Egypt had not yet settled down after the outburst against Christian insults which had alarmed the authorities in Cairo. In 3 days Anthony Fenton had discovered the dregs at the bottom of the teapot, and had doubtless done something toward calming the tempest in it, but the troubled water had not time to cool. It could easily be brought to the boil again, and the despoiling of a harem by Europeans, the harem of an important man, would be oil thrown into the dying fire under the tempestuous teapot. The furious voices grew louder. From the wave of sound words spattered out and up like a spray. Perhaps in all that astonished crowd gathered in the Temple of Mut, Bronson and I were the only ones who knew enough Arabic to catch their meanings. His question was answered, and this was not a stage. Those shouting men were not supers in the wings, they were in earnest. Foolish and dreamlike and utterly unreal as it seemed, their hearts were hot with savage anger against men and women of an alien race, and, though what they might do to us would be visited on their own heads tomorrow, they were not thinking of tomorrow now. As for us, it was just possible that owing to this silly dream we were having about a mob of common, uneducated Arabs, for some of us there might not be any tomorrow. "Is there a back door where we can dash out and give them the slip?" asked Bronson. I was thinking hard. Mine was the responsibility for my charges, these rich, comfortable tourists from London and New York, Birmingham and Manchester, Chicago and St. Louis. None of them yet knew that they were in danger. They were thinking about their dinner and their pleasant, lighted cabins on board the Enchantress Isis, waiting for them not far away. They realized that something was the matter out there, that a lot of Arabs were making a row, but it interested and amused them impersonally. If somebody had robbed or murdered somebody else, morally it was a pity, of course, but it added to the picturesqueness of the scene, and would be nice to tell about at home. I felt myself overflowing with a sudden new tenderness for the set, so often troublesome. This that was going to happen, unless we could stop it, was in truth the affair of Monty and Bridget, Mabella Hânem and the Bronsons, Anthony Fenton and me, but all would be involved, the innocent with the guilty, unless very quickly the duffer of the company could think of some way out. "No," I heard myself say with decision, "we mustn't leave the temple. They're superstitious about it. Few, if any, will venture in. What they want is to lure us into the open. And there must be no panic. Certainly my friend, unless he's been hurt, is working for us somewhere. It's only a question of minutes. He borrowed my Browning today. I wish—" I glanced toward Bridget and Monty. They stood at a little distance with Mrs. Bronson and Mabel, but the faces of both were turned toward us. I saw that they guessed the meaning of the uproar outside. Biddy's great soft eyes spoke to mine, spoke, and told me the truth about myself. How I loved her, Biddy O'Brien, and no one else on earth. How I would die for her, and let all the rest die, if need be, yes, even Monty Gilder, to whom I had been idiot enough to write that letter. If I could save Biddy, what did anything else beside matter? But yes, it did matter. I must save them all, and the light that had lit up my dim soul gave me an inspiration. Because I loved Biddy, I knew what to do. "I've got a little surprise for everyone," I yelled, to be heard over the noise outside, where Rashid Bey's mob was now probably trying to make our donkey boys and Arabia men join in the fight or the siege. "Mr. Neil Sheridan will kindly lead the whole party to the sanctuary, which his knowledge of architecture will enable him to find, on the axis of the temple. Down that passage, please. In 15 minutes the surprise will be ready, and you will receive the signal to return from Mr. Bronson, American Consul at Assuat. No time for introductions now." Sheridan, amazed, but perhaps not displeased, emerged from the dark corner where, until the row began, he had been examining a half-erased wall carving. "Come along then, everybody," he shouted good-naturedly, and as the procession formed, discussing the surprise and the noise, now mysteriously linked together in the minds of my charges, I saw the veiled and hooded Mabel shyly try to pull Mrs. Bronson into place with her, as near as possible to Sheridan. She must have suspected that there was trouble brewing, and guessed the cause. Her timid, self-centered little soul instinctively sought shelter in the neighborhood of a friend, who would perhaps have been more than a friend if he could. So she followed him, he not knowing what eyes the grey veil hid, but Mrs. Bronson broke away from the small hand and hurried back to her husband. "What am I to do?" she asked. "Go with the others," he said quietly. "Take care of the girl. Lord Ernest has some plan." She went reluctantly, but Bridget and Monty and Mrs. East lingered at the tail of the procession, returning to us as the others vanished down the passageway that led toward the sanctuary. I motioned them away, but Monty ran forward while Biddy kept Cleopatra from following. They talked together and argued, Biddy's arm round the taller woman's waist, as Monty came straight to me, and put into my hand Anthony Fenton's pistol. "I didn't have to use it," she said. "It's all loaded and ready. And I'm going to stay here with you and Mr. Bronson to help. What are you planning to do?" "Please run away," I said, "and take Biddy and your aunt. You must. That's the only help we want." "Not till you tell me what you mean to do." "Oh, only to try a trick to frighten those Arab sheep out there. They funk this temple at night anyhow. And I've just remembered that I brought some Bengal fire to light the place up and amuse the crowd. I thought if a red blaze suddenly burst out it would give those fellows a scare, and the police are on the way." "But the Arabs will see that you're only two." "They shan't see us at all. We'll hide behind those statues, and pot at them if they do come in, which I doubt. Now off with the three of you," and I was getting my illumination ready. To my surprise and relief, Monty obeyed without further argument. Dimly it passed through my mind that she had been profiting by her lessons lately. I threw one glance over my shoulder, more, I'm afraid, to see whether my dear Bridget were on her way to safety than through anxiety for Miss Gilder. The three figures had already disappeared in the darkness, and Bronson and I gave ourselves to the work of lighting up. An ocean roar of voices surged round the temple entrance now, but the red light flamed like the fires of hell, and I, peeping from behind a statue, revolver in hand, saw that the temple itself had not been invaded. The flare lit the foreground of the darkness outside, and the columns of the front court. I could see a moving throng of black and white-clad figures, gesticulating, running to and fro, seeming to urge each other to some action, yet none coming forward. I sprinkled on more powder, and up blazed the Bengal fire again. Now somebody was taking the lead. A tall man was pushing through the crowd. Would they follow this brave one? My fingers closed round the Browning. He was between the columns at last, but the light was dying down. I threw on all I had of the powder, and stared through the red dazzle to make certain what was happening, since this might decide our fate. The tall man's back was turned to us. He seemed to be motioning the crowd away instead of urging them on. How to make sure, in the blood-colored glare, whether a man's turban was white or green or crimson? But that gesture, that lift of the head! No mistaking that, the man was Antoun, Ahmed Antoun, the worshipful Haji, haranguing the mob. Hardly would they let him speak at first. Those on the outskirts tried to yell him down. I heard the word "traitor," and before the light ebbed I thought I caught sight of Rashid's pale face under the red tarbouch, Rashid's broad shoulders in European coat, edging past jebbas and galabiyas toward the columns. Then, just as the light died, from behind us in the temple came a cry. Above the shouting of the Haji, who was beginning to make himself heard by the crowd, it rang out shrill and clear, a woman's voice, Monty Gilder's. She called on the name of Antoun, and then was silent. I lifted my candle lantern, all that was left to illuminate the darkness, and saw at the far end of the court shadowy figures struggling together. It seemed to me that there were not two, but 4 or 5. I ran toward them, and Bronson ran, but someone bounded past us both, a tall man in a green turban. A shot was fired after him and hit a statue. I heard subconsciously a miniature crash of chipped granite, but I don't think Anthony heard or had heard anything since that call for Antoun. He had dashed ahead, though we had the start and were running fast. Rounding a group of statues, erect and falling, I saw a candle-lantern on the floor, and knew that Monty, and perhaps Biddy, had not obediently followed the procession to the sanctuary after all. They had waited to watch and listen, hiding behind the black statues of Sekhet, and men who had crept in by another way, doubtless by the small Ptolemaic gate opening on the lake, had taken them by surprise. Anthony had got to the shadowy mass, which moved like black wind-blown clouds, vague and shapeless, before Bronson and I were near enough to distinguish one form from another. As for our eyes, his tall figure blended with the waving shadows. 2 revolver shots exploded with thunderous reverberations. We did not know if he or another had fired, but almost simultaneously with the second shot 2 black shapes separated themselves from the rest, fleeing into darkness. They took the way by which they must have come, the way leading toward the gate on the lake. 3 seconds later we were on the spot, and the only shadows left resolved themselves under my candlelight into the forms of Bridget O'Neill, Monty Gilder, Anthony Fenton, and Mrs. East, somewhat in the background. Monty's hat was off, and Biddy's was apparently hanging by a hat-pin. Their hair was in disorder, a rope of Biddy's falling over one shoulder, a shining braid of Monty's hanging down her back. Monty seemed to be more or less in the arms of Antoun, but only vaguely and by accident. Dimly I gathered that she had stumbled, and that he had saved her from falling. Biddy was fastening up the front of her grey chiffon blouse, which was open and torn. Her hands trembled, and I could see that her breast rose and fell convulsively, for, though the light was dim, I was looking at her, while I merely glanced at the others. Mrs. East was crying, but Bridget and Monty had smiles for Bronson and me as we came blundering along, stumbling over unseen obstacles. "Someone stole up behind me with an electric torch, and tried to drag me away," said Monty, in a weak little voice, scarcely at all like her own. It sounded as if a ventriloquist were imitating her. "Someone called me Esme O'Brien, whispered right in my ear. And I screamed and fought, and Antoun came. I think then that the man pushed me down as he ran away. Anyhow I fell, and Antoun picked me up. Oh, Biddy, are you safe? Why, your dress is torn." "Yes, but I'm safe," answered another small, weak voice. "I fought, too. I think they wanted to rob me. Thank goodness I didn't have it on." "The bag, dearest?" "Yes, darling, the bag. I thought I wouldn't wear it today." Out in the night the yells had subsided since the Hadji's harangue, if not wholly because of it. "The police have come," said Anthony. "It occurred to me that Rashid and some friends of his were cooking up a plan, and while I was getting into my clothes in the village it jumped into my head what it might be. So on my way out to the temple I stopped and left a warning. We're all right now, and I don't think the Arab lot would have dared venture in anyhow. These chaps who sneaked in at the back and attacked the ladies were dressed like the rest, but I doubt they were Arabs." He would have doubted still more if he had known all that I knew. But the one secret I'd kept from him was Biddy's secret. The words Esme O'Brien whispered to Monty as yet meant nothing save bewilderment to Fenton. "The 15 minutes are up, and no signal yet for your famous surprise," called out Sir John Biddle's complaining voice from the end of a dark passage. "Has anything gone wrong?" "Oh, I was going to give you a Bengal fire illumination of the temple for a climax," I explained, coming suavely forward to meet him with my candle. "But the beastly stuff sort of went off by itself, and it's all used up. I was just going to call you." "Well, not much harm done," said Sir John. "We've seen the sanctuary, such as it is. A little disappointing, perhaps, especially as Mr. Sheridan found a friend with Mrs. Bronson, the consul's wife, and preferred talking with her to giving out information to us from his stores of knowledge. But luckily not more than 20 minutes wasted. By the way, what's become of the row outside? Seems to have fizzled down while we were away, like your red fire." Yes, a great man of some sort was addressing the crowd, but the police came and made it move on. There's been a bit of a negative grumbling in the Nile towns lately. You may have read some paragraphs about it in the Cairo papers? So the police are rather quick to break up meetings. "Why should men meet near the Temple of Mut?" inquired Sir John. "I shouldn't think of doing it." "Perhaps in the beginning they hoped to get something out of the Europeans," I said lightly, "but they've given that up, evidently." "I hope they haven't seduced our donkey boys and arabeah drivers," exclaimed Sir John. "I'm hungry, and I'm in a hurry to get home." "Not they. Donkey boys and arabeah men aren't easily seduced when there's a question of backsheesh. They're all right. I'm only sorry about the Bengal fire." "Well, it was a good idea, anyhow," Sir John patronized me. "C'est vrai," I heard a murmur in his chosen language, the Hadji who had saved the situation. "C'était une idée très bien pour un duffer." Chapter 24